What would it take to smell and hear like a dog? A dog can walk into a room you just left and know exactly where you sat, how long you were there, and possibly what you had for lunch. You can walk into that same room and smell, at best, coffee. A dog can hear you pull into the driveway from inside the house, engines still a block away, and know it's your car specifically, not the neighbor's. You find out when the door opens. So here's the actual question. Not why is your nose so bad? Something more useful. What would it take mechanically to build a human that could do both of these things? And once you see the real cost, you'll understand exactly why nobody who could smell and hear like that could have ever built a civilization. Let's start with the nose, because the gap here isn't small. It's almost incomprehensible. Humans have roughly 6 million olfactory receptors, the specialized cells that detect airborne chemical molecules and translate them into a smell signal your brain can interpret. Dogs have somewhere between 200 and 300 million, depending on the breed, up to 50 times more raw detection hardware than you're carrying. But the receptor count is only half the story, and it's not even the more important half. In humans, the region of the brain responsible for processing smell, the olfactory bulb, takes up a small fraction of total brain volume. In dogs, that same structure is proportionally about 40 times larger relative to brain size. Dogs don't just detect more, they dedicate a genuinely enormous share of their actual brain tissue to analyzing what they detect, layering, separating, and tracking individual scent threads the way you might separate individual instruments out of a full orchestra. This is why a trained detection dog can identify a specific person's scent trail hours after they walk through an area, distinguish individual scent components within a mixture, and track a moving target purely by smell, from meters or sometimes kilometers away. So, step 1 of building a dog-nosed human. Massively expand the number of olfactory receptors and radically enlarge the olfactory processing region of the brain to match. Here's where the actual cost shows up, and it's not subtle. Your brain has a fixed energy budget. The human brain already consumes roughly 20% of your body's total energy at rest, despite being about 2% of your body weight, an extraordinarily expensive organ to run. Every additional cubic centimeter dedicated to one function is cubic centimeter not available for another. This isn't a metaphor, it's basic neuroanatomy. Brain tissue devoted to one specialized task is, in real and measurable terms, tissue not available for a different specialized task. In humans, the region that would need to shrink to make room for dog-level smell processing sits right next door, functionally and often physically, to areas responsible for complex visual processing and higher-order reasoning, including regions in the frontal cortex associated with abstract thought, planning, and language. Researchers studying comparative brain anatomy across mammals have consistently found an inverse relationship between the size of the olfactory system and the size of brain regions devoted to vision and complex cognition. Primates, as a group, show some of the smallest olfactory bulbs relative to brain size of any mammalian order, and simultaneously some of the largest visual and associative cortices. This isn't a coincidence sitting quietly in the data. It's one of the clearest trade-offs in mammalian brain evolution. More smell, less room for everything primates like you actually rely on. Give a human a dog's nose, properly wired into a brain that could actually use it, and something else has to give up its share of a strictly limited energy and space budget. Most likely candidate, based on exactly the tissue that would need to be repurposed, the very same higher-order processing that lets you read, plan multiple steps ahead, and hold an abstract conversation about trade-offs in evolutionary biology. That's the first bill. Now the ears. A dog's hearing range extends up to roughly 45,000 hertz. Yours tops out around 20,000, and that's if you're young. The number drops with age. Dogs can also localize the source of a sound with remarkable precision and speed, partly because of something you can watch happen in real time. Their ears physically move. Dogs have up to 18 separate muscles controlling each ear, letting them rotate, tilt, and independently aim each ear toward a sound source like a pair of small satellite dishes without turning the head at all. This dramatically improves both the speed and the accuracy of locating exactly where a sound is coming from, especially at a distance or in a noisy environment. Humans have the same basic muscles, technically. They're called the auricular muscles, and in most people, they're vestigial, present but largely non-functional. The reason a small percentage of people can wiggle their ears slightly, while most cannot move them at all. The wiring for ear movement never fully disappeared. It just stopped being maintained as a priority generations ago. So, step 2 of building a dog-eared human: reactivate and dramatically strengthen the auricular muscles for independent ear rotation and extend the range of the inner ear's hair cells to detect frequencies more than double what you currently perceive. Here's the cost, and it connects directly back to something extremely specific about what makes human hearing unusual in the first place. Human hearing isn't just generally worse than a dog's across the board. It's specifically, precisely tuned to a narrow band of frequencies that overlap almost exactly with the range of human speech, roughly 500 to 4,000 hertz, the range where consonants and vowels carry the most distinguishing information. Within that narrow band, human auditory processing is exceptional, capable of distinguishing subtle differences in pitch, tone, and timing that let you understand speech clearly even in a noisy room full of competing sound. Researchers studying the evolution of human hearing have found that portions of the human ear canal and middle ear structure appear specifically shaped to amplify frequencies in the speech range, more than would be expected from general mammalian hearing alone. This isn't incidental, it's a specialization, and specializations, by definition, come at the expense of generalization elsewhere. Widening your hearing range to include a dog's 45,000 hertz ceiling would mean redistributing auditory processing capacity across a much broader frequency spectrum. The almost certain result, based on how auditory tuning trade-offs work in every species where they've been studied, reduced precision within the narrow speech-critical range you currently rely on. You'd hear a wider spectrum of the world, and you'd likely understand a mumbled sentence across a crowded room measurably worse than you do right now. As for the ears themselves physically moving, reactivating those muscles wouldn't cost you much functionally. They're mostly just unused, not actively repurposed for something else. But the underlying reason they went vestigial in the first place tells you something important. Human survival stopped depending on split-second, hands-free sound localization roughly as much as it once did. Once early humans began relying more heavily on group vigilance, verbal communication, and tools, rather than each individual constantly and independently tracking every sound in the environment alone. So here's the complete bill, side by side. To smell like a dog, properly, with a brain that could actually process the input, you'd need to give up meaningful territory from the same brain regions responsible for complex visual processing, planning, and abstract reasoning. To hear like a dog, across its full range, you'd need to trade away some of the precision that currently lets you understand speech clearly in a noisy, complicated social environment. The exact skill an intensely social, language-based species depends on constantly. Notice the pattern because it's the same one from the cat, just wearing different clothes. Abstract reasoning, precise speech comprehension, those aren't incidental human traits sitting around waiting to be optimized further. According to a substantial body of research on human cognitive and social evolution, those are close to the central adaptations that let a comparatively weak, slow, thin-skinned primate outcompete faster, stronger animals, not through smell or hearing range, but through coordinated planning, shared language, and complex social cooperation across large groups. A dog is built as a solitary, capable, scent and sound-driven tracker, descended from pack hunters that needed to follow prey across kilometers of terrain using smell and locate threats or opportunities using directional hearing, often independently of visual contact entirely. A human became a species that survives primarily through language, shared planning, and abstract problem-solving across groups, where understanding a specific sentence clearly matters enormously more on a daily basis than detecting a specific scent trail from 2 kilometers away ever would. You could, in principle, build a human with a dog's nose and a dog's ears. Evolution simply never had a strong enough reason to, because the version of you that could do it would very likely have been a noticeably worse conversationalist, a noticeably worse planner, and a noticeably worse abstract thinker than the version of you that exists right now. Before we finish, an honest note. Brain trade-offs like this are well supported at the level of broad patterns across species, more olfactory investment generally correlating with less relative investment elsewhere. But the exact, precise wiring of any single hypothetical human redesign is obviously not something anyone has tested directly, for fairly obvious reasons. This is a description of a genuine, well-documented pattern in comparative neuroanatomy, not a literal engineering blueprint. So the next time your dog notices someone walking past the house half a block away, ears swiveling independently toward the sound before you've heard anything at all, you're not watching a better sensory system. You're watching the other side of a trade you already won. Every single time you've ever understood a sentence, planned more than one step ahead, or had an actual conversation about any of this, you are not broken. You just bet on the conversation instead of the scent trail.